Hi, everybody. Welcome to part three of this Batman fanfic read. Batman Sees the Light, of course, is what we've been reading for the last 2 weeks, and this will be part three. So thanks, everybody, for coming. I hope you, if you haven't heard parts one and two, they are linked in the description of this video. But don't if you're watching this live, like don't go watch those now. Stick around for part three, and I'll just give you like a quick summary of what parts one and two were. Part one was basically Bruce Wayne is at a party, and he runs into Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul's daughter Talia is missing. He wants Batman's help to help find Talia. Batman basically says no and kicks his tush. We're keeping it PG-13, by the way. Kicks the crap out of Ra's al Ghul, and also deduces that it may have something to do with Talia being pregnant. So then we get to part two, where Bruce calls Dick Grayson, Nightwing, in to tell him that he might have to leave town for a few months, and asks if Dick would mind sticking around to take over as Batman temporarily, while Bruce goes off and looks for Talia. And that brings us up to date to part three. But as I said last week, I will not actually be reading part three. You've heard me mention a few times, I think, over the course of these fanfic streams that I'm writing this fanfic with a co-writer, with a writing partner, and it will actually be my writing partner who is reading the end of this story tonight. And it's completely appropriate because not only is this person my writing partner in general for this fanfic, but they actually wrote this story. I did not write a single word of this story that I have been reading to you over the last 2 weeks. So, writing partner, please sign in. Are
Hi.
you? Hi, are you there?
Yeah.
So my writing partner is you have seen her in my live chat, and you also, if you listen to the Ensign's log, you know her as well, because she is now a we'll call you a recurring guest, a recurring cast member on the Ensign's log, and it is of course my old friend Dana. So hi, Dana.
Hi, everybody.
So Dana is going to read the last part of her story that she wrote that I have been reading the last 2 weeks. The
By the way,
huh?
thank you, by the way, for doing that. At
Oh,
this point, I'm kind of wishing that I'd asked you to read all three.
oh, you're gonna do great. You're gonna do great. So people really like the first two parts, from what I can tell. At least people who were in the live chat when we were reading them before. So, um,
Well, I'm kind of, well, some random geek is saying that he knew it. But I'm kind of hoping Caroline's here because
uh,
she actually guessed.
Caroline guessed correctly. Caroline almost blew the whole thing. We were trying to keep this. We were trying to be sort of cutesy and coy about it, like, "Ooh, who's going to be the co-writer?" And Caroline just busts out last week and is like, "I bet it's Dana." Oh, thanks, Caroline.
It's a
Well,
good guess.
opinion no one cares about in the live chat says didn't see that coming. So I don't know if they are being if they're
There's a really big smiley face though,
yeah,
so they're
it could
just
yeah.
it was like really obvious, and we were being like hush hush, no spoilers. They're like, yeah, very predictable. So
Well, I suppose without any further ado, whenever you're ready, we can
oh,
proceed with part three.
okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Part three. The third house just past the intersection of Laurel Street and Peachtree Lane stood out for only one reason: that it did not stand out at all. Dry leaves dotted the lawn, though not enough to raise the ire of any homeowners association. The house next door was not as well maintained, sporting patchy sprigs of grass tall enough that some of them even leaned over. The house across the street had a front yard that was much more rigorously landscaped. Like nearly every house on the block, it was a simple ranch, probably 3 bedrooms, vinyl siding. Bruce had parked on the street in front of the first house and started there. He had a set of flyers about an upcoming city council vote on a proposed change to the recycling program. At the first house, no one had answered the door. At the second, it had been a retired lady who had invited him in for a glass of sweet tea and listened politely, nodding, and finally said, "Well, I don't know about that, but you seem like a very nice young man. I hope things work out," before sending him on his way. He had no idea whether she favored the change or even understood it, but apparently that was the way things worked in the South. The third door, that was the one that might be hers. He had been through what felt like countless cities across the world. 47, actually, but it felt countless. Perhaps this would be another dead end. Or if it was her, maybe she just wouldn't answer. He knocked, then took a breath, readying his pitch. "Hello, Bruce." The breath caught in his throat. How could it have been 10 years? "Hello," he replied softly. I suppose you've figured out why I'm here." She opened the door wider and stepped back, gesturing for him to come in. "You mean it's not about the recycling program?" He stepped through the doorway, looking discreetly around. The front entrance opened into a large living area, furnished in a modest, inoffensive style. The floor was pine laminate, the walls a gentle shade of blue. Sheer curtains provided minimal privacy, but the swag draped along the top edge of the window was functional, not just decorative, and lined with vinyl. A single cord pull would set it loose, blocking all sight lines. "I do have information about that if you'd like it." Standing beside the high-backed sofa, he turned around to face her, nudging it with his knee as he did. It didn't budge. "But it sounds like you've already made sure to keep yourself informed." Talia, Tammy Williams legally, closed the door and walked toward him. "Well, I just think it's real important to be involved in your community. Makes a difference when folks care, you know?" She smiled, moving past him. "Can I get you a glass of tea or just water? I've one of them filters on the tap, so it's a bit smoother." Bruce shook his head. "I'm fine, thank you for offering. And since you're already aware of the recycling program, let me just put the city council's website on this so that you can keep up to date with other initiatives and upcoming events and such." He took out a pen and bent over, holding the flyers on his knee, scribbling quickly on one of them. "Your father looking for you. Safe to talk?" With a chuckle, he stood and handed it to her. "Honestly, they should have the website on the flyer itself. I should let somebody know about that." She glanced at it, then nodded slowly. "It doesn't surprise me. Small towns, you know. Everyone knows everything about everybody anyhow." One brow arched. "Or, that is, they believe that they do." Her voice was richer, deeper. Hers. Something nodded in his gut, and he was barely 20 again. "Hello, Talia," he said. "I take it that you are not here at his behest?" she asked, looking down at the flyer as she carefully tore it into thin strips. Bruce shook his head. "He did ask. I said no." She looked up at him, brows lifted. "And the two of you parted as unlikely friends?" His mouth quirked at the corners. "Not exactly. It was a rather athletic sort of no, you could say." Talia threw back her head and laughed openly. "I can imagine that, actually. Quite an interesting scenario." "You are definitely not wrong about that," he said with a sigh, rubbing at his forehead. The cut had long since healed, but it wasn't difficult to remember. He took a slow, cautious breath. The thing is, he seemed to think that there was something going on that had led to your disappearance. She tilted her head, looking at him thoughtfully for a moment, then let out a sigh. You would have made a fine Southern gentleman, Mr. Wayne, she said, turning and heading toward the kitchen. He followed her. Oh? She leaned against the counter. Because you're quite adept at avoiding saying anything direct. One shoulder lifted. So, what is it that has brought you here? She folded her arms, gazing at him through narrowed eyes. The knot in his gut seemed to be twisting the rest of him. He swallowed some of it down. Hope, he said finally. Hope that you were all right, that you had finally been able to make your way out, that you could have your own life. Her brows lifted just faintly. So, you didn't come to ask me if I was carrying your child? Each word was a dagger, harsh and pointed. Bruce tried to take a slow breath, but his chest was tight. Not primarily, but I can't help wondering. Is it our child? Talia's lips pressed together tightly. No. The word hung in the air, clear and final. You never expressed any interest in fathering a child. Precisely the opposite, as I recall. And I have no idea how the procedure worked, but in truth, it makes no difference. It is neither your child nor our child. It is my child. She lifted her chin. Is that clear? Suddenly, her expression melted into fear. From behind him, Bruce heard a small voice. Amma? He turned as Talia swept past him, dropping to a crouch. You didn't want to wait for me? What happened? Did you have a bad dream? A mass of black waves stuck out in various directions as the child blinked up at Talia. No, but Wabbit wants juice. The explanation was punctuated by holding out a weathered plush toy that at one point had probably been more recognizable as a rabbit. Oh, he does he? Well, when do we have juice? Talia reached up, gently smoothing hair into place. With snack. Mm-hmm. And when do we have snack? A sigh. After story. Yep. Talia pressed a soft kiss to the child's forehead. But it's not story time yet, Habibti. Mommy's talking to Mr. Bruce, so I want you and Rabbit to go build me the biggest tower you can, okay? Okay. Large, dark eyes peered up at him. How are Mr. Bruce? He received a wave from both of them, and then small feet pattered across the living room to a large plastic tub. Bruce couldn't look away. He was aware of Talia rising again and moving to stand next to him. She's wonderful, he whispered. Talia chuckled. Not all the time, but in general, yes. She let out a contented sigh. She is the best part of my life. For a few moments, they both stood there, watching the girl lean into the plastic tub and emerge with 1 or 2 blocks at a time, dropping them on the floor. Her name is Zia, Talia added. It means light. It suits her. He took a breath. His chest felt somehow both tight and full. He looked at Talia, still watching her daughter. As she stood there, a soft smile played over her mouth, and her eyes shone. He'd never seen that expression from her. She looks, you both, you seem happy. She looked up at him, and her smile turned wistful. Mostly. She wasn't the first. My first was actually a boy. Father was ecstatic, of course. She looked out across the room, past Zia, her gaze distant. His name was going to be Damien. But about a month after that, something happened. I don't know why. There was no heartbeat. They induced me then. There really wasn't anything to be done. One of the nurses cleaned him off and let me hold him. I suppose I should be grateful. Maybe I am. I really don't know. Her voice trailed off, and she was silent. He was so tiny, she added, finally. He just looked like a tiny, tiny baby who was just sleeping. I think if he'd opened his eyes, they would have been blue, like yours. She closed her eyes and took several quiet breaths. They let me say goodbye, and then they took him away. Talia cleared her throat, wrapping her arms about herself. Father tried again as soon as the medics told him that it would be safe. There were a few failed attempts, just 2 or 3, I think, before the test was positive again. This time, though, it was a girl. I decided that her name would be Melisande, my mother's name, you know. Not that it mattered. A girl couldn't be his heir. They took care of that as soon as they found out. She let out a shaky breath. I like to imagine that they're somewhere better now, taking care of each other. That was when I knew that it would never really be my baby, no matter what happened. And so I started making plans even before the next time there was a positive test. Father relies on me and he knows I'm quite skilled, but he underestimated not only my abilities, but my resources. She smiled faintly, her eyes narrowing. I suppose that he would say it merely demonstrates my duplicitous feminine nature. Bruce shook his head. It shows your strength, your skill, and your determination. Across the room, Zia had decided that she had enough blocks, plopped down amid them, and began stacking them, one on top of the next. How old would the others be now? Damien would have turned 5 last fall. Melisand's birthday would be next month. Talia closed her eyes, tears flowing down her cheeks. Right around Valentine's Day. She bowed her head.
Thank you.
Excuse me, please. She turned and walked further into the kitchen, leaning forward against the countertop. I try not to let Zia see. He looked briefly over his shoulder, out the window, then at Zia, still absorbed in her blocks. And then he stepped close and gently pulled Talia into his arms. She won't see, he murmured. Take all the time you need. One hand gently smoothed her dark hair as she leaned against him, still choking back her sobs. Her hands were fists against his chest. It's not fair, she whispered. I would have been a good mother. Ya Hada. He reached down, tilting her head up toward him. You already are a good mother. Your daughter is healthy, happy, safe. What more could any parent hope for? Through her tears, she smiled. Thank you, beloved. Bruce shook his head. It's nothing, just the truth. His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. But if you ever need anything. She stepped back, taking a shaky breath. Thank you. We're quite all right. We don't need anything from you. Bruce looked down, took a breath. He nodded. You're right, he said, looking up at her again. However, if there's anything that I can do that would be helpful, anything you can think of, will you tell me? Talia held his gaze for a long moment, her eyes full of pain. You could stay, she whispered. The knot twisted again, sharply, and he closed his eyes, his shoulders drooping. It was difficult even to take a breath. She let out a short, bitter laugh. I know. You have responsibilities. You've made choices. She gave a long, wistful sigh. But you could make different choices. A beat. Her hand slipped into his and he opened his eyes. She looked up at him again, hope and longing mingling there. Gotham would survive without you. He remained silent. None of this was new to them. None of it had changed. She nodded. I know, she said again, her tone heavy with resignation. There were dozens of things he could say to her, but all of them were weak or hollow or just flat out fabrications. So instead, he looked over his shoulder at Zia, who had stood up to add blocks to the top of her tower. I don't want to be nothing to her, he said, his voice thick. Whether she was really his or not, it didn't matter. She might have been. She could have been. But what I want matters less than what's best for her. If I visited sometimes, would that help or not? He turned back to Talia. I don't want to hurt her. Talia watched him, frowning in thought. It's not out of the question. You have to be willing to say something. He regarded her just as cautiously. What is it? Say, I am not and will never be Zia's father. Bruce took a breath, his brows pulling together. I am not her father, and I will never make that demand of her. But if she asks me, I will be as honest as I can. This time it wasn't just the nod. Everything within him clenched. But even knowing what was at stake, what he might be giving up, he knew it would be pointless to attempt to lie. But Talia nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. She smiled a touch, thinking of the future. Very well. She nodded again, more decisively. You're welcome to visit as often as you like. Please, do let me know ahead of time. If you simply dropped by, we might be out at the park or at the market. She reached up with one hand, her fingertips softly caressing his forehead. I would hate to miss you. He turned his head, resting his cheek against her palm. I wish things were different, he whispered. I wish I could love you the way you want me to. The way you deserve to be loved, Rohi. At the sound of that word from his lips, she shivered and her eyes drifted closed. When she opened them again, they shimmered. But that is not the way things are, my beloved, she whispered back. She smiled regretfully, then stretched up, pressing a kiss to his cheek. He wrapped his arms around her, ever so gently, and Talia melted into his embrace, her forehead nuzzling his chin. He lowered his head, then, and finally kissed her, desire and regret tempered by something deeper. She wrapped her arms around him as well, and he held on tightly, even though it wasn't anything close to enough just to touch her, to taste her. Knowing that the moment wouldn't last, that a breath later, he would lift his head and she'd let go, and he'd step away. And then he did. On his way out of town, he pulled in line at the drive-thru of a Burger Fool and ordered a combo meal. No salt on the fries. When he paid, the cashier told him to pull into one of the parking spots at the front of the lot, said his order would be out in just a few minutes. He followed her instructions and put the car in park, but left the engine running. He leaned forward, folding his arms on the curve of the steering wheel, and rested his forehead on them. He didn't even have to close his eyes for the scene to appear. Zia was slightly larger and even more active than before, but she still loved her blocks. They were sitting crisscross applesauce next to each other on the laminate floor, building a castle. Apparently, an arched entryway was a non-negotiable element of castles. They had tried several designs that had toppled. So far, she had not dissolved in frustration, though the fourth attempt, which had seemed promising, had brought her close. The front door opened. Even before it closed, Zia was on her feet, eyes wide, and darted toward the entryway. Amma! Amma! Talia laughed as her knees were violently grappled by strong toddler arms. Hello, Habibti. Did you have a good day? Zia's head craned way back to look up at her mother. Mostly, we tried to make a couple, but it keeps falling over. Oh, and Daddy's making dinner. Daddy. Bruce's eyes crinkled with a smile to match as he walked over. Sweetie, your Amma had a big day at work today and she needs her legs so she can go sit down. Okay. Zia let go of the knees and immediately reached up and took Talia's hand in hers, leading her over to the sofa. Talia sank into it with a sigh of relief. What's for dinner? Zia clambered up next to her. Chicken something. Tetrazzini, Bruce clarified. Zia nodded. That. Talia wrinkled her nose a little. Beloved, I'm so sorry. It sounds lovely, but do you think you could just put on a can of soup for me? Something simple, brothy. Always with the demands, he mock sighed, walking over behind the sofa. He leaned down, draping his arms over her shoulders, and reached lower to brush his fingers over the slight roundness to her belly. With his lips next to her ear, he sang, soft and slow. Whatever Amma wants, Amma gets. There was a knock at the window, and he sat up, blinking. A uniformed teenager stood outside, holding his bag of food and his soda. He rolled the window down. Thanks, he said, reaching out to take it from her. He set the bag on the passenger seat and the cup in the console holder. Then he eased out of the parking lot and headed down Peachtree toward the highway, toward Gotham. And that's the end.
I'm going to need a minute.
They didn't get it. No, he's not a psychopath. He ordered
the salt. Yeah.
Yeah, the salt on the fries was so that he could have a minute. They would have to make it fresh, and they'd have to have him pull in, and he could sit and just not have to drive, just sort of have a moment. Because he just wanted to think about what might have been. That wasn't.
And when we were talking about this story as you were writing it, that last part of Bruce, parked at the drive-through and imagining this alternate life, that was not, I don't think we talked about that ahead of time before you started writing that bit. Mm-mm. Or maybe we did just like right before you started. I mean, that was not like part of the original plan that you had laid out. And God, that just...
No.
Oh, I mean, and
you can kind of tell because like and then he did. It's a that short bit. It's a definite close to the scene.
And, yeah. Applause. By the way, can I just before I want to and Dana can hang out for a little bit and we'll answer questions or talk about some other stuff. I just want to mention before we get into that and before we start hanging with the live chat, this is a fundraiser for Give Directly, as the previous fanfic live streams have been, and Brian Pooh KC has donated twice, so thank you very much, and John Gingras has also donated.
Thank you so much.
So if anybody watching, if you appreciated the story and you want to show your appreciation and you have a couple extra bucks, you can donate just via a super chat, and it goes directly to Give Directly, which is an awesome charity that takes donations and then gives money directly to people who are living in poverty. I mean, it's a fantastic charity. So, so people really seem to like it, which they oughta, because it's a really good story.
Yes, Steve, tell people how they should feel.
I'm telling you how you should feel, audience. It's okay though, because I didn't actually write. If it was my story and I was like, and you should like it, then that's a little, you can't.
No. Audience, listen, it's okay to feel however you feel. Your feelings are valid.
But if anybody has anything negative to say, I will block you immediately. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Come on, Random Geek, say something negative.
I'm going to test this.
Wait, not you, because he totally do it to you.
I know he's not blocking me. I would never block some random geek. He says negative in quotes. What a jerk. Oh, I love it. So can we talk about the story a little bit? And because
But you don't know this because it's not in the chat, but I just got a text message from somebody who said that they didn't get a chance to watch all of it, but they thought I did great.
That's awesome.
So
great. Your biggest fan appreciated the story.
No. That's the not current, but
not the other. Oh, I see.
Another. I have so I'll just go ahead and say this. I have I actually, as I was writing this, I used the fanfic as actually an example of, in one of my classes. I'm a teacher. I teach high school language arts, and thank you, some random geek. Since I teach language arts, they were working on a personal essay, a narrative essay, and so I was talking to them. I think it was about because this is they're good writers, and I was thinking about not just making your sentences complete sentences and capitalization, not just grammar stuff, but style stuff. And I said sometimes I'll go through, and I like the word moment a lot, like a lot. So I'll go through and I'll when I notice that a word appears like twice in 2 pages, then I'll do a find to see how many times it actually shows up. And I'll be like, I have to. Yeah. And so they said, wait, what are you talking about, Ms. Cole? I'm like, well, well, what are you writing? I said, well, the thing that I'm writing is, it's fanfic. They're like, it's fanfic. It's fanfic. Oh, God. I'm like, they're like, well, what's it about? I'm like, well, it's about Batman. And I said, I tell you what, this essay is due Friday night. And as soon as everybody has their essay posted to our class online, everybody has it turned in, I will post a PDF of scene 1 on the classroom. And this was before fall break. And I said, and if this was due on Friday, and this was like Wednesday, I said, if everybody finishes it by the beginning of class on Wednesday, I will read the first scene live for you guys. And they didn't. They didn't get that. Which was kind of good because I was very nervous about it. And I didn't even have the whole thing written yet. So I finished it up over fall break. So yay for fall break.
Yeah.
And then so a couple of them like asked me about it. And I said, all right, well, you turned yours in and you're caught up on all of your work. So I sent them the PDF and I said, and if you're interested, there's been live readings of the first 2 scenes and I'm actually going to read the third one if you want. And so I sent them the link. And so a former student of mine messaged me and said that they got to see some of it. So that was just.
That's great. Yeah. I mean,
I got 2 exclamation points.
Ooh, I think it deserves, I mean, two is good.
Hey, you don't say anything bad about any of my students, current or former. Just let it go.
I wasn't saying anything. 2 exclamation points is great.
Some random geek, you would be surprised at what, best student. I mean, they're like puppies. They're all good in their own way.
I want to acknowledge another comment in the live chat from Facundo Borden, who says, "We need more of Dana, please. Have we got some good news for you?"
So, it's Wednesday, isn't it, Steve?
It is Wednesday.
We're doing a live stream.
That's right.
And you have a series, don't you, called Trek Actually?
I do. It is favored by a certain number of my subscribers. Yes.
Yeah, and I noticed when you read my story last week that in the live chat later on, everybody started talking about Star Trek.
Yeah, they did. That tends to happen lately because of all the Star Trek stuff that I talked about.
You do all the Star Trek stuff. And what's your favorite series?
Well, if I had to choose, actually, I don't. It's easy. It's easy. It's not even have to choose. It's easy. It's Deep Space Nine, of course.
Oh, it's easy. So, I actually, sorry, Jason's not here, so I can admit this. I haven't actually seen any episodes of the original series. Don't let him know. He'll never find out now.
I'm texting him right now.
Which is why somebody commented on my accent as Lenore, and I'm like, what are they talking about? She hasn't been on the show before. And then you're like, no, she was on like the show.
She's like, a TOS character, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, but as it happens, I think maybe I should give DS9 a try. Don't you think so? I
love that we're pretending like we haven't talked about this already.
Next week, we're gonna watch it. We're gonna do a watch along.
That's right.
I'm gonna start watching DS9, 1 episode every other week, and Steve's gonna introduce me to his favorite series, and we're gonna talk about it, and I will let you know what I think. Honest.
That's true. Hopefully you like it, but if you don't, it might even make it a better show.
Maybe because I get to tell you, as I often do, how wrong you are.
Yes, it happens from time to time. You don't tell. It's not all the time. We do agree, quite often. But when we disagree, that's right. Absolutely.
And we both like Nightwing so much.
Yes, we do. So that's definitely been common ground. So next Wednesday, starting next Wednesday, and every Wednesday thereafter. Sort of.
So we're calling it Trek reluctantly.
Yes.
Because, what if I don't? I might not like it. I might not. But it's only fair. It's only fair that I get to do the same for Steve, who has
Yep.
Firefly.
That's right.
So
So 1 week we will watch an episode of Deep Space Nine, and the following week we will watch an episode of Firefly, and we'll just alternate
until we run out of Firefly.
until we run, and then we'll start watching something else on the other weeks.
Or not. Then we might just take a week to just sit and yak.
We can whatever we
really yet. That's like in the future.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, Trek reluctantly, and it will be so it'll be a watch along. So anybody who wants to watch with us, you'll have to, because I don't have the rights to stream episodes of Star Trek on my channel, so you'll have to. We're gonna watch it on Netflix, and
we'll do like a countdown and play, and then we're also gonna pause when where the commercial breaks would have been, and we're gonna talk about what's happened so far, and no spoilers at that point because I won't have seen the rest, but maybe I'll guess, and of course I'll be right because it's me.
Because you have a keen analytical mind.
Exactly. And because as a language arts teacher, I work with story, and if I guess wrong, it'll end up being fic, let's say. like this
exactly. That's right. Okay, so let's talk about now that. So yeah, so I'm sure I'll plug it again before we go off the stream here. But yeah, so next Wednesday, Trek reluctantly, we will be watching. I think we're going to watch because the first episode of DS9 is a double episode. So I think we agreed we're going to watch the first half of it for the first show, and then the week after we'll watch the first episode of Firefly. Then we'll come back after that and watch the second half.
Long too, isn't it?
Is it?
I don't remember.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. We'll 2 weeks for that.
We'll know by the time. Yes, and Radical Bacon pointed out in the live chat there are 176 episodes of Deep Space Nine. So we're going to do this show for a long time.
Unless everybody hates you and you have to go back to working a pilot.
I'll still have free time.
Fair enough.
Yes.
7 years to complete the project.
It will. Yes, that's right. Because if we watch an episode every other week, that's roughly a single TV season a year, because we have these ridiculoly long episode counts in American TV where it's like 25 episodes a year. So
that's like normal. And that was one of my favorite Good Place jokes was. When they said, it ran so long, there were like 12 episodes.
Yes.
I don't know what Tahani said it.
Yes.
Random Geek, the broadcast. I think we're going to be watching them in the intended order.
The intended order.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. I remember I watched the first episode and maybe the second episode years and years ago, and I've really probably forgotten most of it, so it's good that we're watching it again. And I haven't seen much beyond that. So yeah, I remember people. Well, go ahead.
I can't wait because there are things about it that are a lot of fun, and there are 2-hour two-parters.
Okay. Okay. So
there are things about it that I have very strong. Let's say I have very strong opinions about, and that I have strong opinions about like everything. So that these are like really strong. That's like they're even more so. I'll just say Joss Whedon, and I'll leave it at that.
Yes, there are strong opinions to be had about old Joss.
Boy, and oh boy. I'm gonna hold him back. I'm waiting.
Yeah, wait. Save it for the show, baby. Save it for the show. But yeah, so that's next week, and between now and then, and anybody in the live chat who has things they want to talk about or questions for either of us, please feel free to throw it out there. But I thought we could talk a little bit about our fanfic that we've been writing, because
so the premise for this,
yes,
and I think some of you have been, because of course, I watched the previous live streams of these. And the premise for this was, no, I don't like Damian Wayne. The idea
that was the kernel, yeah,
that was
the seed.
Kernel. No, the whole idea that Bruce knocks anybody up ever is like a bad premise, and I I am not willing to forgive a bad premise. Like, I don't like The Dark Knight Returns because it's from the idea that Batman, he just decided to stop.
Yeah.
He just decided. And then he came back. Like, no, that's bad. That's bad. That's badly written. That's, yeah, Beautiful-ish one. It's not super complicated, but a little bit, because his dialogue's great, and I love good dialogue. But there's a lot of other things to talk about besides that.
Yes.
So yeah, this was I was like, but I mean, there's lots of things, all kinds of weird science, and then possibly sorcery, and so I think in our canon we've decided that there is actual sorcery there. The Lazarus Pit is not just mystical science. There's
Right.
actual sorcery, because that's going to be involved in things that happen later that we're not going to talk about because spoilers. But yeah, the idea that Damian Wayne never happened, and I killed him off before he was born.
I love that, like, because that starting point is so beautifully petty and nerdy, and it's just like, yeah,
I'm petty,
and it's like,
so petty,
and because the original idea was, God, I hate that character. I
Wayne
don't.
is never going to exist in
And-
my.
And then you take that and you use it as the starting point for this beautiful, just absolutely wrenching story about, Batman dreaming of this other life where he's a father and he's with Talia, and this, these two people who like belong together but can't be together. And there's just like, and it's like, and it comes out of this, I want to kill Damien, like place. And
But like, I don't want to kill Damien. I just kind of want him to not exist.
want to prevent him.
Yeah.
You want to rewrite history so he's just not there.
Random Geek asks, why would you name your kid Damien? I'm obviously that was Race's choice. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the bad guy, that's part of the bad guy thing. It sounds like Onion.
It's like when they named the kid Damien in The Omen. It's like, what did you expect? If you named him Josh, everything would have been fine.
Yeah, Joshua's a good name. That's a.
That ain't no Satan name,
It's the other one.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Literally, yes. But yeah, so we and you, of course, the fan.
Actually fits in with the one that you wrote.
Yeah, the fan.
After, so the scene 2 with Bruce and Dick, and Dick taking over Gotham, is several years later, but it's
Right.
still in that same universe.
Right, exactly. And that's it's one of the things I really, really like about the scene that I read last week, the Bruce and Dick scene, because it's sort of the closing of the circle of that scene in the story I read a couple weeks ago, which was like our version of the Batman Robin breakup, where Dick hits him and walks out on him. And now it's like, this is years later and they have mended fences, and and yeah, I really like it. So yeah, but you helped me with that story, with the Bruce and the Dick goes off on his own story.
I'm so glad I'm done reading. Oh my God. You helped me. Just, like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay.
You were great.
You were so. Okay. But, like, knowing and feeling are two different things. You guys, I was so freaking out. My students have seen me freak out, but
It was so good. It's a great story. You read it so beautifully, and everybody seems to have liked it, which is a good thing. No, I'm
beautiful.
kidding.
That really is beautifulist. Okay. So some random geek asks, would you ship Batman with Talia, Catwoman, or Wonder Woman?
I mean, after this, I would have to say Talia.
Yeah,
like,
before this, though.
Here's the thing. I think you and I see more or less eye to eye on this, is that neither one of us is usually all that interested in giving Batman a love interest.
Oh yeah, that's
just
why.
don't-
I have not seen the last. I don't know how many Batman movies.
Mhm.
Like, I lost count. I think there have been at least 2 Batmans since.
Yes, that you've missed.
I saw like the Christopher Nolan ones. I saw the first one,
Mhm.
I think, and then I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's that. they did things wrong.
And he definitely, well, I mean, the thing, they basically gave him Spider-Man's romantic story,
Yeah.
like from the first Spider-Man movie. They're like, what if Mary Jane was Rachel and Bruce and Spider-Man was Batman?
That's the thing. Batman doesn't have a girlfriend.
Yeah. So we see similarly as far as that goes. I mean, I think because like I said, it's not. I wouldn't say for me personally, I don't have like a hard fast rule saying he never has a girlfriend. I just think that it's just usually it's not. That's not an interesting direction for me to take that character. But
Always.
But so I think Catwoman is interesting as sort of like as a foil or as like a flirtation or something, but I wouldn't ship them like seriously. And now, I mean, by the same token, there have been really, really good stories written in the past that have been Batman Catwoman stories that have been about them getting together that I have really liked. Like there's I forget what it was. I forget what it was called now. I think it might have been. I think it might have been called The Autobiography of Bruce Wayne. It was the last story, or one of the last like Batman stories before Crisis, in the 80s, before they rebooted the whole thing, and it was sort of like the last story. It was intended to be the last story of like the original Batman, the one that had been there since the 40s, and his part of his fate was that him and Selina eventually got married, and that was pretty well done, and I have kind of a soft spot for that story. But generally speaking, like I would
I'm so excited about our Catwoman.
Oh yes, and that's a point I keep wanting to get to because we keep going off on little bunny trails, which is great because I could talk about this all night. But we have like a whole universe planned, and I mean, who knows how much of it will ever actually get written? But we have like just pages and pages of timeline and character stuff, and what is going to happen. And there's stuff that like we have ideas for stories to write that can take place during the interval between scene 2 and scene 3 of this story.
Oh yeah, I mean, with Dick as Batman.
Yeah.
Yes. And then of course Cass and Tim.
Right.
And then and Barbara is still around at this point. Barbara's around. So, and there are things going on with her that are spoilery, and I'm really excited about that. Radical Bacon, I'm going to disagree that you say Batman is too emotionally closed off to have a girlfriend. No, again, for him, I think it's priorities. I think, and he's very strong on his priorities.
Right. Which is why he does what he does to Talia in this story.
Ooh,
it's not that he doesn't care about her. It's that
I mean, arguably that he doesn't love her.
Right.
But, and also I think, he's also thinking about her safety and Zia's. I mean, they're safe.
Yeah.
He knows that. And I also do not think, that ties in with Beautiful as one's question, that if Bruce actually experiences love, would that mean the end of Batman? No, I think he do. We saw that with Dick in the previous scene. I think we see that in this scene with Talia. I think perfectly capable of experiencing love, but he sees his identity is so tied up in taking care of Gotham. That is his first priority always.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's just I think if he's a robot who just doesn't feel any emotions, that to me is not a very interesting character. If he's capable of, if he has these feelings, but he doesn't act on them for whatever reason, or he doesn't feel like he can allow himself to explore those feelings, either as like a father figure for Dick, or as a partner or a lover for Talia, or whatever, it's like he feels it, but he has to close himself off from it because of this other thing that he has decided should take priority. And that to me is really interesting. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't feel the feelings, then you can't do that.
It's very well, it's stoicism. It's very Vulcan-y.
Yes. Look at you with the Star Trek reference, and you said you don't know anything about it.
I didn't say I didn't know anything.
That's true.
About it. Like
you said, you've never seen Deep Space Nine. That's true.
I said I know you got single space dad. Something has happened to Space Mom. obviously, because he's a space dad.
Because Space Mom ain't in the show.
Show, and he's got a space adolescent son, so we got some
Yeah.
real potential issues there, and they're
Yeah.
on a space station, and
Yeah.
then it's space.
Yeah, and there are yeah, and there are 6 other spaces because it is Deep Space Nine. So you got Space Dad, Space Son, Space Station, and then there got to be 6 more somewhere.
Okay, I was like, wait, it's Deep Space Nine. I thought you were talking. I assumed that like it was like the 9th space station.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, I was right on that. That was just a total guess, though.
That was yeah. They never explain the name because it's like, why would you waste time explaining why it's called Deep Space Nine? That's just what it's called.
So Random Geek asked about Barbara Gordon as Oracle, which yes.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I loved her run as Oracle in the comics.
Oh yeah.
Although I will admit, especially after they freaking Jason stayed dead for so long, and I was just really impressed by that. Because I mean, everybody else comes back, and Jason stays dead. And then, but I mean, it really didn't make sense to have her not have the opportunity to, to be healed. And
Right.
so there are all kinds of issues there, though, because it was just an executive decision. There was nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they just changed it. They just retconned it when they did reboot number, like, I don't know, 12 or 13.
Whichever one.
We went with she ended up moving into Burnside, which there was so I really love the costume, but I really have problems with how Babs is written when they rebooted her most recently. I really think not a lot, but the one big thing, her asking the guy's name. I'm like, what? No. I mean, I've nothing against her having a one night stand, but she'd know the guy's name.
Right.
She's not, she's not an airhead. I mean,
Right.
she's not, I mean, she would know. And also she's polite. Just so, but yeah. And so that's actually, the events of the Killing Joke are part of our canon. I will go ahead and say that. Although
Yes.
and some of that's written, although I don't think it's been shared on the channel. Correct?
No, we haven't read any of that, and it's your version of the Killing Joke. It's
it's
more or less the same in the broad strokes, but it's different.
Yeah. So yeah, we sort of took like our favorite parts out of canon and said,
yeah,
and then other things went away. And also that actually came out of, and I'll go ahead and this is a big one, it's way in the future. I'll just give it away.
Yeah, go for it.
Out of my original fanfic idea, which is the Joker is going to die. So even for Damien, the Joker's going to die. I don't like the Joker as a character. I think the way that he has been handled encourages lazy writing, and I disapprove. As an English teacher, I don't approve of lazy writing. No. As a reader, I don't know none of this lazy writing nonsense.
I would say, like, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this in private before. Like, if I were writing like a Batman comic, I might have 1 or 2 like really good Joker stories in me, and then after that, I wouldn't know what to do with him, unless you just got to the point where you're just doing like caper stories where it's like, oh, the Joker escaped again, Batman's got to catch him, and it's like
exactly like
yeah, and those can be fun, but it's hard to tell. Like if you're trying, if you aspire to tell a story that is meaningful. And not just meaningful in like, meaningful to the reader, but like telling a story that explores the characters in a meaningful way. It's like, how many Batman Joker stories can you really tell? And especially in light of the ones that have already been written, because there have been, over the last 80 years, there have been some really, really good Batman Joker stories. And it's like, how many more do you expect me to write?
So many. So I know we take questions from the but I'd like to ask. So I've said the Joker is going to die, and I'm curious what people think that we might come up with.
Oh yeah, how are we going to kill the Joker? Huh?
But in the meantime, because there's a little bit of delay. So we talked about that. And okay, so This is actually kind of related to, I'm very practical about how far left I am. I'm very, 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 very far left, but I'm also very practical about it. Radical Bacon says that Bruce could take better care of Gotham by not being a billionaire, but keep in mind, Gotham, it does not exist in isolation. Gotham exists, and there's Metropolis, and there's Lex Luthor, and that's also part of this universe.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about that. Wayne Enterprises is something that Bruce sees that needs to exist because we do still, I mean, this world is still, this society, this United States in our universe is still capitalist, and you still have to deal, you still are in that society. And we've also talked about if there was, if some of the things that have been going on in our society with, coronavirus and some of the recent protests, if that happened, how would Bruce respond? And, the possibility of conflict between Batman and Jim, and Jim, of course, trying to do the right thing. And then, of course, bringing Barbara into that. There's some really interesting possibilities with the characters and where they stand on this and why. And Barbara makes some interesting choices later on that lead to, not always seeing eye to eye with her dad as much as they love him. Some Random Geek, a really long time. Honestly, some of them you probably shouldn't read because they're not worth it. And how we could, so he asked, how do you feel about the Red Hood? A whole, as much as, bringing characters back from the dead is just, it happens. Fine, but God, at least they didn't name him after a burger chain.
Yeah. Oh,
poor freaking Tim.
Red Robin. I will say, we have talked and we have an idea. Well, it was your idea, for what to do with Jason. That I really, really like. I don't want to, I mean,
no spoilers there.
No spoilers, but the idea of what's going to happen to Jason in our universe is something that I really, really like. But I am not a fan of the Red Hood character. I don't think I hate him as much as you hate Damien. But I'm like,
it's not really hate. It's more like despise. Like, really.
Not hate, despise. But because and you mentioned it a minute ago, like because they let him stay dead for so long. I mean, it was 20 years, wasn't it? It was over 20 years. It was over 20 years. And it's like, and then it's like, oh, well, we got nothing else to do. Let's bring him back. And that just felt.
Never expect this. Yeah. I mean, come on! I called that like 15 years ago. Easy. Yeah, it's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time, and it's also another thing that you and I talk about a lot, and I think has come up in live streams and stuff when people have asked like Batman related questions.
Probably me.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, because just like how many Robins do we need? You know what I mean? Like we crossed Damien off the list, so that's one Robin that we're not going to have to worry about. You know what I mean? It's like, and I mean we do have plans for Jason, but but the idea is a really, really good story.
Bacon. Thank you so much for coming.
Bye, Radical Bacon.
Bye. But Random Geek, you ask, shouldn't Bruce Wayne fund massive mutual aid societies and help build bottom-up communities? Who says that he doesn't?
I think go ahead.
Just because his name's not on them, Bruce Wayne has his fingers in a lot of pies. He's a smart cookie.
I think one of the interesting things about the way we've talked about going with Bruce, and Radical Bacon mentioned in a question earlier, like how would Batman interact with Black Lives Matter? Or how would Bruce interact with Black Lives Matter specifically? I think
is gonna be like, well, people have what they believe in, and that's important,
Oh yeah, public Bruce wouldn't care. He'd be just like, glug glug glug, because he's being Bruce, but
because he's just gotten up from yet another nap.
But I do think that is something that needs to be dealt with. Like, I mean, it would be if we're doing something like we're trying to do and do like tell stories in the same continuity and show the characters growing and changing over time. I feel like that's a really, really interesting character arc for Batman to be on, you know, where he eventually has to reckon with, you know, like, what do I do when, like, how do I respond to a protest if the police are the ones instigating violence? You know, do I side with the protesters and try to protect them against the police, who probably, a lot of them probably don't like me all that much anyway, because I'm a vigilante, you know? I just think that's it's a really, really interesting spot to put Bruce in and to explore. And yes, you can use it for social commentary, and you can use it to sort of say something through the superhero, which I always love, but, you know, it's just a really interesting spot to put that character in, and have him sort of grapple with, like, what kind of a hero does he want to be? Whose side is he going to be on? What does justice account? What does justice consist of in this situation?
We take the characters and we put them in uncomfortable situations, like me.
Yeah. So.
Well, it seems like things are sort of winding down. So.
Yeah, and we've been going for, it's been an hour, and, you know, so you read your story for the first half, and we've been hanging out with the live chat for the second half, so we can start to wrap up. But yeah, so this will definitely be, I mean, this will not be the last fanfic that we read, and also next week we start the Star Trek show. And we have plans for other videos that we can do together in the future as well. So yeah, so people in the live chat who are like, "Oh, more Dana," you're just hang in there. There's more Dana coming.
Yep, I finally joined Steve's Patreon, but as I've told him a couple times, I'm like, yeah, but I always patronize you. What are you talking about?
What else is new?
All right. Well, thanks so much. And also don't forget that you've got your Ask Away coming up on Friday.
On Friday.
And then on Monday you have, don't you? You have your very first interview show?
Not this Monday. Monday after. Yeah, it's in November 9th. Next Monday, next Monday I'm not doing anything. But the Monday after that, November 9th, is the first interview show.
After the election.
After the election. Which hopefully will go a certain way.
The way that we want it to
go. The way that we want it to go. The way that 538 is currently predicting it will go. That's another experience that Dana and I share, is obsessively checking 538 like multiple times a day, and like messaging each other, go like, "Did you see? It's one of the gray dots turned blue again."
All right. Okay. So
yes.
I'm gonna I haven't been able to eat. Like
okay. All right, we're gonna let Dana go so she can eat, and I'm going to go. I think actually I need to eat something too, and you know, so there you go. Now
you didn't have a story to read.
Not this time. I had to listen to, but I had to listen to you read your story. I didn't mean it that way. I got to. I had the privilege, along with everybody watching, I had the privilege of listening to you read your story. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Check in with us. Well, watch me on Friday for Ask Away, and then check us out next Wednesday for the first episode of Trek Reluctantly, where we watch the first episode of Deep Space Nine together, and it'll be a watch along. So you watch along with us and hear us snark over it, and you know, talk over the episode. And yeah.
Next Wednesday will be the day after, right?
Huh?
Will be the day after.
The day after? Oh, the day after the election, yeah. So we'll either be in a real good mood or a real bad mood.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. All right.
All right.
So I just quit this? I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, let me end the stream first, and then you can quit. Okay. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. Have a good night.